Bhaskar, Bhaskar, can you hear me? Bhaskar,
Yes, sir.
okay, you are seeing the screen also, na?
Yes, sir.
This is called soft computing lecture 2. Okay, fine. Let us start our proceedings today. The time is 2. Uh, can somebody summarize what we learned in the last class? Rupa Maitreyi, Rupa, Sri Krishna.
Sir, yes, sir.
Can you summarize Sri Krishna? What you did? What
Oh,
you did?
yesterday we studied about what is the difference between soft computing and hard computing, sir.
Excellent, excellent. Difference
And
between
then, then
1 minute. Difference between hard computing and soft computing. So now tell me what is hard and what is soft.
uh, hard computing is something I don't remember exactly, sir. But hard computer is something
Ah,
that uh,
you require
uh,
precise data. Okay?
precise data, sir.
Precise data
Soft computing is
and
like
the
it
rules.
needs a group of data, sir.
No, the rules should be very well defined. The programming aspect, very well defined rules is what you require. And what else we learned, man, last class? I gave you
Uh,
some idea about the various tools.
and then various tools
Yeah,
that we are using like MATLAB and
yeah,
PyTorch.
MATLAB, Python. Under Python, you have
Uh,
all kinds of machine learning
PyTorch.
tools,
And
scikit-learn.
we learned
Yeah,
about how to use how to start with Anaconda or Google Colab.
yeah, Anaconda, Google Colab. Did you visit any of this website yesterday? How
So
many of
once I
you?
used Google Colab, sir, already.
Very good, very good. So Jupyter Notebook and Google
Jupyter
Colab and all
notebooks.
very powerful. Yeah, very powerful. These are okay. So that's what we learned in the last class. So fundamentally, we are interested in working with the data. Okay. So there is a fundamental paradigm shift when it comes to a machine with the conventional machines and the machine learning based systems. So in the conventional machines, you give certain specific rules to operate and you provide the data also as input. Okay, based on the rules, you have to write the algorithm has to be written on the machine will decide. Okay, it will decide something, the final decision. Okay, so the output we call it, whether it's a cat or a dog. For example, if I'm going to give a cat or a dog, so you provide all the features of the cat, you provide all the features of the dog to the machine, based on the rules, when you give the dog picture, based on the rules, the machine has to identify whether it is a cat or dog. So that's basically the conventional machines. Okay, you need to provide all the rules. But in the case of machine learning, we provide both the input data as well as the output data. Okay, and the machine learning will try to deduce the rules. Can you see the difference? It will try to see the pattern existing between the input and output. Okay, how the input is mapped to the output. Okay, so that's what mapping they call it. So machine learning is identifying this map. Okay, that in fact is more like you are not writing any code at all. Programming part you are not defining anything, but the machine learning will take care of finding out the appropriate relationship between the input output data. So that's why it's very powerful. So this domain has it's in fact it's primarily because of the last 15 years. If you look at the history of machine learning. This last 15 years is quite a significant achievements have been happened. Okay, significant changes happen. Primarily because of the key technologies like, okay, we have technologies like high computing power. Okay, the computational power has increased dramatically in the past 15 years. High computational powers with the technologies like graphical processing unit. Okay, they're very powerful. Along with that, some very smart algorithms. Okay, smart algorithms like the convolutional net you might have heard of. Okay, the deep learning methods. Okay, this is a deep learning technology is something that's revolutionized this domain. Deep learning. Okay, deep learning is basically a neural network. Deep learning neural network, okay? And particularly for image-based applications. Which kind of image-based applications and speech, image and natural language processing. These two domains are quite important domain, application domain related to many of the giant players like corporations like Google, okay, Facebook. They want to identify faces, or they want to work with big data. Okay. The third component is the big data. So training samples are humongous, okay, voluminous. So you can train your network because ML basically works on what? Data. Better, more amount of data you provide to the ML technology, better the learning will be. Okay, better the learning. It will try to relate quite comfortably. Okay, so in that case, big data is another area which has really helped ML to flourish. Okay, there is no doubt about it. Okay, so you have GPU technologies one end, very smart algorithms like deep learning algorithms, along with big data. Okay, more importantly, there is a more kind of open source softwares. No? They played an important role here. It's more of a democratization. Okay. Democracy in terms of what I'm saying is sharing. Okay, sharing information. New technologies have immediately been shared and people started working on it, and the research has really flourished in the past 10-15 years. Okay, there are a lot of hackathons, okay, competitions that's happening in this domain, which is really helping this domain to flourish as well as to evolve quite fastly, very fast manner. Okay, so these are all some things that you should keep it in mind. So that's why data science has become a very popular terminology, primarily because of these reasons. One is very smart algorithms that are breakthroughs that has happened in the field of neural networks and deep learning networks. Okay, machine learning domain. Okay, the machine learning domain is breakthrough technologies has helped. Number one. Number two, the need for big data, particularly videos and images, to be used for some revenue generating purpose. That was really the botheration for big companies, Google, Facebook. So they funded heavily these kind of technologies. This is another important reason why this domain has flourished. Huge amount of funding. Okay, these companies they put and they helped the research centers to work on it. They funded the proposals. They funded the people who are really interested in this domain, and therefore, along with open source softwares, the open community, they started sharing all these informations without hiding anything. So naturally, within a short period of time, this domain has evolved. So that is why you are seeing a lot of applications now when it comes to machine learning and AI. Okay, so the robotics domain is also another domain related to this, and perception, natural language processing for automation purpose, autonomous cars, everything has really flourished. So if you look at these related technologies like robotics, autonomous cars, okay, then you have Alexa-like components. Alexa, you know that, Google. In fact, you have natural language processing devices. Translators and all. Okay? Very famously, recommendation systems. Okay, recommending systems. If you buy something in Amazon, what happens? Immediately you'll be receiving some mails. Receiving mails to think about products which are related to what you have bought. Okay, they advertise quite comfortably, primarily because of these recommendation systems. Okay, so very powerful algorithms they employ. Then the what do you call the spam detecting systems. All these are quite useful. Face detection. Face detection algorithms heavily employed in Facebook. Image recognitions and image-based applications. So you might have heard of something like ImageNet. I don't know how many of you know this. Just type in Google and try to see it. Next class I will ask this question. Go through it. What is ImageNet algorithms? Okay, so just go through it. So that's why this domain has now picked up. Okay, that's why we are also now interested. Okay, because of this option to learn new technology in a much quicker way. Okay, that's why most of the people are now eyeing for this particular domain. So that's what in fact we discussed. So for many problems, it's difficult to program the correct behavior by hand. Okay, you cannot give rules perfectly. Applications like recognizing people and objects, understanding human speech and all, the possibilities, as that day somebody said, the possibilities are huge. Okay, so you cannot find out all the possibilities, all the variations of recognizing people, understanding human speech, it will be very difficult. So framing rules and writing a conventional procedural code, okay, procedural code will be a difficult task, extremely difficult task. So naturally, we are interested in moving towards machine learning. So machine learning approach, what happens, as I told you earlier, program an algorithm to automatically learn from data. So you provide data and with experience. So it's quite obvious now that with more the experience in seeing, for example, in seeing a particular input again and again, better the learning. Okay, better the learning. For example, if I'm going to train my network to recognize a cat or a dog, what do? I find out a lot of cat images, I'll find out a lot of dog images, and I'll feed it to the neural network to learn it. Okay, if I provide a lot of data, naturally the learning ability of the network is going to enhance. Okay, it's going to increase drastically. So that's why big data has played an important role here. But more the amount of data, with deep learning also coming into picture, the computational requirements will also dramatically increase. Computational requirement. You understand what I'm saying? So the computational requirements is going to increase also. But fortunately for us, in the past 1 decade, the computing power has drastically increased. Okay, so with the increased computational power, like as Krishna has mentioned about Google Colab, Google Colab, you have provisions for using GPUs, graphical processing unit, free of cost. It means what? Anybody from anywhere, okay, a person sitting in Afghanistan with, but a provision for internet is there, he can access this GPU and he can write his own machine learning code and he can give millions of data, he can feed it as input and he can study the response. Can you imagine it? It's very, very big idea. Okay, it's complete democracy. That's why I said education has become completely democratized and anybody can do anything from anywhere. So the learning is feasible by sitting from anywhere. You'll be sitting somewhere in a remote place. But with the provision of internet, when you have internet access, particularly bandwidth connection is good. Okay, you can do all this. Okay, so that's why this domain has flourished like anything, data science. Some reasons why you may want to use a learning algorithm is definitely learning algorithm. More the data you provide, better the learning. So it's very difficult to code up a solution by hand. So particularly vision, speech, and all difficult. Systems need to adapt to a changing environment. It's another one key problem. Particularly spam detection. Okay, these guys who are creating the spams, they're very clever. They will be modifying the key terms in that mail repeatedly. In a frequent manner, they'll be modifying the key letters, and it will be very difficult for the conventional code to identify such a kind of letters. Okay, so the machine has to learn online. Okay, based on the new data, the machine should be in a position to learn from the new data. So can you imagine how you will identify a spam mail using machine learning? Anybody? Gurubram?
So we can just use some inputs to it and then train the data.
Very good. So you are saying that for my machine learning algorithm, I will give some data and I will train the machine learning algorithm. For example, it may be a neural network. The machine learning algorithm can be a neural network or a deep learning network. Okay. So as yesterday class, as I told you, machine learning is a big domain, and within that you have neural network, and within that you have deep learning. Okay, you understand that. So naturally, you are providing data and you are training it. And what kind of data you provide? Can you imagine that? Spam.
Text data.
Yeah, text data, and you should provide something called labeled data. So you have to see a mail, and if you see, okay, and if you identify it is a spam, then you have to label it as spam. Okay, then you'll be collecting huge amount of data, different emails, different mails that you are receiving now. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out of the first mail is a spam, and the second mail is not a spam, hand. The third one is a spam. The fourth one is a spam. Fifth one is not a spam. So you need to have a huge amount of data. So I am talking in terms of millions. The data, if I'm going to say only 2,000 emails, this will not be sufficient at all to train my network. Sufficiency comes only when you have huge millions of data, that is big data. So for processing this, you require GPUs. That's why you're going for GPUs. Okay, so now I have the data in hand, and it is a labeled data. I'm calling this kind of training something, a very famous term. Most of you will be knowing this, called supervisory learning. Supervisory learning means what? I take this data. Okay, these emails marked as spam and ham. Ham means it's not a spam. Okay, that's the meaning. Then what do? I will be giving both the input and output to the data. First email I provide along with the label. So the network will see, the neural network will see the connection. Okay, it will learn from that. So every time when I'm going to provide the data from these emails, and it will be in a position to relate it with the label. Now what happens? I'm going to get a new data. For example, let us imagine I have trained the network to distinguish whether the given email is a ham or a spam by showing some examples. I have trained it. Imagine. Now when I'm going to get a new data, an email, it should be in a position to tell whether it is a spam or a ham. That's where the problem comes. Okay. Most of the time, by giving huge amounts of data like this, we'll be in a position to recognize the new email, the new data, and you can classify it as either spam or ham comfortably. But also it will be difficult. Sometimes there is a possibility that it can misclassify also. So that's where all these modern day algorithms comes into picture. Okay, the algorithmic innovations, still it is an open area. Generalization is a big problem in neural network. What is generalization? Anybody can imagine this term, generalization?
As of now, we can only build an AI for a specific task.
Okay.
There is no generalized AI for all the tasks.
Yeah, that's right. So for a new task with a lot of variations, okay, it's difficult for you to exactly believe your network that it will give an appropriate output. Okay, believing your network, still it is not accurate. Okay, the accuracy has to be increased. Okay, but people are working on it. This is a big domain. Okay, and there are a lot of scope for doing research in this domain, and therefore the algorithms innovations in terms of providing a generalized network is a big domain, that's a happening domain, and people are working on it. Okay, so it's a good motivation for you to work on this domain. So that's one idea. Okay, so now the third point here is you want the system to perform better than the human programmers. That's another one area. Along with that, fairness, privacy and fairness, ranking search results and all, if you give it to human beings, they may not be very fair. Okay, particularly ranking. Okay, you want to rank something. So normally human biases are involved. Statistical bias and human bias quite popular. So, but here in this case, the machine, when it's doing with huge amount of data, you cannot cheat it. Okay, at some point of time, the ranking will be appropriate. Okay, with more and more data you provide, better ranking you will get. Particularly movie ranking. Netflix, in fact, they heavily employ neural networks and deep learning techniques. Okay, they have a lot of recommendation systems and ranking systems using all these modern day neural networks and deep learning techniques is what they are doing. So if you carefully look at the history of the machine learning, okay, it all started during the year 1940s. Okay, so when people started working with what do you call learning, what is learning, what is vision, okay, what is the conditioning of a human mind, particularly a very famous experiment, I don't know how many of you are aware of this. Pavlov has done some experiments. He's a Russian. Anybody here in this class aware of this guy, Pavlov, Russian guy? Do you know this guy? Can you identify this guy? Yeah. Who is that? Yeah.
Harsha, like
Harsha.
the
Harsha,
psychological experiment.
Yeah, what kind of psychological experiment? Do you have an idea, Harsha?
Conditional response.
Okay. Conditional response, that's right. Pavlov, in fact, he has done with a dog. Okay, what happens? What he did is something like this. Every day, imagine by afternoon, around 12 p.m., he provide the dog with food. That too delicious food. The dog likes it really. So what he did, he did it for some around 4 days. On the 5th day, he observed that the dog by around 12 p.m. it starts salivating, expecting the food. Okay. So what happens here is the brain is every time when he provides the food, now he rings a bell. He rings the bell and then he'll provide the food. So what happens on the 5th day when he only rings the bell, the dog starts salivating. So what is the idea here? The first one is the human mind is conditioned. The animal mind is conditioned. The dog mind is conditioned. Conditioned to what? The ringing of the bell. Okay, can you see it? The ringing of the bell. So every time the mind is now the brain of the dog is associating, okay, an input with something else different. What is that? Food. Okay, so the input is the ringing of the bell. So that's what they call it as associative memory. Okay, associative memory, associative mind. Okay, all these heavily employed in neural network. In fact, Hebb, this guy, Hebb by 1940s, has taken what inspired by Pavlov, and he designed, in fact, a learning algorithm, a very powerful learning algorithm, which in fact you'll be studying in this course, called Hebbian learning algorithm. Hebbian learning algorithm, or a computing machine is designed with Hebbian learning capacity. Okay, that's the idea inspired from Pavlov. Okay, it's more of associative memory concept. And then McCulloch and Pitts, these two guys, they come up with a neuronal model. Okay, after studying human brain and all, okay, they come up with a neuronal model, and we'll be learning that during 1940s. And a very powerful learning algorithm along with the neuronal model was created by Rosenblatt during the year 1950, which in fact will be learning. It's called a perceptron learning. Perceptron learning group. This one has created a huge impact over society at that time. People really believe that they can create machines which can do whatever human beings can do. They believed on that time. Because of this perceptron learning rule, he became quite famous, and Widrow and Hoff, the learning rules, really helped this perceptron to learn things in the right way. Okay, Widrow and Hoff, in fact, if you look at Widrow, this learning rule is stemming from basically something called adaptive filters. See, I am very happy to say one thing. There is a close connection between control systems research and neural networks research. And control systems also, there are a lot of optimization algorithms, feedback, error analysis, all those happening now. The same thing happening in this domain also, neural networks also. So there is a lot of one-to-one connection, and many neural network learning algorithms are inspired and taken from control theory. Okay, particularly recurrent neural networks. Okay, recurrent neural networks you might have heard of. Recurrent neural networks, the feedback-based, feedback-oriented networks there. These networks, ideas and the dynamics of this Hopfield network here, it's there. No? They are all they have a lot of close connections with basic control theory and the feedback control theory mechanisms. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Maybe those who are interested in control, maybe you can do a kind of can prepare a kind of a report, okay, and they submit it to me, saying what is the connection between control theory and neural networks. How neural networks got influenced by control theory. Control theory is a much older theory. Okay, neural networks much newer one. So how control theory ideas, particularly backpropagation neural network, Hopfield network, recurrent neural network, all these ideas, how it has emerged from the control theory background. Okay, it is quite interesting to study about it, and you can be much more interested in working in this domain. Maybe you may apply neural networks for control applications also for your project. Maybe if you are those who are interested can look into it. But by 1960s, okay, Minsky and Papert, okay, these two guys, they in fact they come up with a book. In fact, the very powerful book, Minsky and Papert. But that book is, and the ideas given in the book has completely demoralized the entire AI community. Okay, the AI community become very demoralized. The reason is, in this book they have very clearly proved, okay, that this perceptron learning network cannot be applied for all kinds of tasks. Okay, they have proved it very clearly during 1960s. So immediately funding stopped, and by 1970s and all, it's a very slower pace. The entire domain research was not very active during that time, and people have started losing hope, okay, of creating a very powerful artificial intelligence. But Fukushima, okay, Fukushima and Grasberg, these people, they were working very hard during this time, and because Fukushima's idea is very important. By 1970, his idea of neocognitron, it's what people during 2006 and 7 they used to got inspired by this neocognitron idea. Maybe I'll use a new page. Okay, neocognitron, Fukushima, and this idea has inspired scientists after 2 decades. And they come up with a very powerful deep learning technique called convolutional nets. Now it is a very, very famous convolutional nets, deep learning. You just type in Google convolutional net, you will get millions of pages, and you will see every open source community now they support it with all kinds of convolutional net algorithms and all. Okay, there are different architectures. Why I am saying it is an idea created during 1970. Okay, has inspired people by 2000s, and they have created a network which in fact has completely changed the technological domain right now. particularly visual computing, image processing and all. Visual computing, I would like to here introduce you one thing. Those who are really interested in image processing, please look at this course at Stanford. Okay, I think many of you may be knowing it. There is a course on visual computing using deep neural networks. The course number I think is 231C 231N. Okay, visual computing. It's a very interesting course. They share all kinds of Python codes. Okay, Jupyter Notebook with you to work on it. They give some good video lectures also. Those who are interested in image processing and eyeing for a project on image processing with machine learning techniques, maybe you can look into this site, visual computing. Why I'm telling is, this is all these top universities now they are working on deep learning for visual applications. The reason is neocognitive. That's so important. You have to give credit to Fukushima to for this kind of complete revolutionizing this domain. Okay, so yeah, so that's what happened. So and then by 1980s, Hopfield and Grossberg, okay, Grossberg neural networks and Cohen. This guy is also quite famous. He has come up with something called a self-organizing map. We'll be learning that. And Hopfield neural network is a backpropagate. It's more like a feedback network. The feedback connections will be there. More connected to control theory. Okay, this Hopfield, Cohen, all these guys have really changed this domain. And then by 2000s, as I told you, deep learning entered. Geoffrey Hinton is a guy. You can see his video lectures. He's a Canadian-based guy. He's come up with a lot of new ideas in the deep learning domain. And you can see some of his video lectures also. Okay, freely available in the YouTube. Okay, by 2000s, he has come up with. Geoffrey Hinton is, in fact, I can say the father of deep learning, okay, techniques. Because of his ideas, completely this domain has revolutionized. So if you look at the kind of applications we are talking about, the application is almost every domain. Okay, almost every technological domain application is there. Technological domain, you can see applications. All of domains, including aerospace, okay, high performance aircraft, autopilots, okay, flight path simulations, aircraft control system application, aircraft component simulations, aircraft component fault detectors, automotive, if you take the automatic gradient systems, warranty activity analyzers, it's more kind of data. Okay, based on data, the neural network will design. Then banking, okay, check and other document readers. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Catch Me If You Can. Anybody in this class?
Sir, me, sir.
Yeah, tell me what is the story, man? DiCaprio movie.
Sir, I think he used to duplicate checks, sir.
Yeah, but he will duplicate and he'll become a trained pattern recognizer.
Trained pattern,
Yeah,
and
and he will find out the fraud. Okay,
I think
the duplicate check. He can find
Leonardo
out.
DiCaprio and Tom Hanks, sir.
Yeah. Two guys, na? Tom Harris also, na?
I think Tom Hanks or Tom Harris.
Tom Hanks, exactly. He who acted in Castaway movie. Tom Hanks. That's right. So why I'm telling it is, DiCaprio, in fact, he's good in pattern recognition. Okay, but there is a limitation for human mind. But a machine can, if you can train a machine, okay, with millions of duplicate checks, the machine will do a much better job. Okay, that's what is happening in the areas of, there is a chess game, okay, and there is a game called AlphaGo. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. AlphaGo is a very powerful machine. Okay, machine learning based Go playing. Go is a game. Okay, Go playing tool. Okay, AlphaGo employs deep learning. How these machines they play now? You'll be training the machine with millions of games. So from the millions of games, it sees a lot of pattern, and when a new player comes and plays with that machine, the machine can easily defeat that guy. Okay, defeating machine nowadays is becoming more and more difficult Because of what? Because of what? Because of defeating machines in games becoming, why it's difficult, man? Krishna? Why it is difficult to defeat machines in the game of chess or Go? Any reason? Can you see some reasons with machine learning techniques?
I think it can predict our next steps. Like after we do 2 or 3 steps, it can form a series that we may do the steps, and it will be like a tree-like formation. So, what will happen if we do this step, or what will happen if we do that step? It's like it will keep on predicting us.
Predicting?
A serious prediction.
And as is prediction and the computation power. Okay, computation power, fastness, as well as the humongous amount of data. Okay, these two, because when you are training a machine to play a game, what do? Can you imagine? Anybody? How do you train a machine to learn?
Yes, sir. First, so it will help. It will help the machine to set up base.
Right. So that's right. See, but I'm saying millions of games. Even the human history, okay, we may not have this many number of matches, millions of matches. For providing this kind of data, what do you do? Can you imagine?
We can use generation of.
Very good, Haidash. We do generate data, okay, simulations. Okay, we conduct hundreds and thousands of simulations, millions of simulations, and try to learn from that. Okay, you punish and reward. Okay, punish and reward. It is another area. In fact, you might have heard of reinforcement learning. It's much happening domain. Okay, you punish and reward, and you try to simulate hundreds and thousands and millions of games, and you learn from simulations. So thereby the machine will become all powerful. But human beings, we cannot do that. Okay, we have some creative force, which I think right now machines they don't have. Okay, we can create a totally unexpected move. Okay, in fact, Carlsen right now the very famous chess player, he is very famous for it. Okay, he gives some unexpected jerk. Okay, nobody can really predict what is going to happen next. And this kind of creative moves, only players who can do that. Only nowadays they are in a position to play against this kind of machines. Otherwise, the machine will just like that eat you in a few moves. Okay, you cannot play with these machines unless you are extremely creative and come up with some radically different moves. Machines, defeating machines is going to become more and more difficult. Okay, this idea is important. Okay, so now look at this domain: defense domain, banking. Okay, defense domain, we have weapons steering, target tracking, object discrimination, facial recognition, okay, and data compression, feature extraction, noise suppression. See the kind of applications these machines can perform. These machine learning techniques can perform. In the electronics domain also, machine vision, as I already told you. Chip failure analysis. These are all some money spinning domain. Process control, okay, integrated circuit chip layout. All these are happening. The financial domain, so particularly, I don't know how many of you are aware of these financial predictions, market predictions. Can anybody in this class have read this book, Fooled by Randomness? Have you heard of this book before? This guy just typed in Google. You will see some of his books. It's quite interesting. Okay, Nicholas Taleb. Okay, he in fact he has predicted. He has written a book, something called Anti-Fragile, and he has predicted this kind of human vulnerability. Okay, against some uncertain events. That's why he is now very famous. Uncertain events, how it can create havoc. And he is in fact strongly saying that it is not feasible for human beings to predict uncertain events, which can very rarely occur, rarely occurring uncertain events. Like for an example, COVID. Like for an example, 11 bar that US attack, that is that Afghanistan, that Taliban's attack now, that what is that? September 11 attack, September 11 attack, okay, like the Bombay attack, 26/12 Bombay attack. So these kind of uncertain events cannot be predicted by human beings. This is what in fact is strongly advocated in his book called Anti-Fragile and Fooled by Randomness. Okay, but the machine learning community, what it's now working on predicting the financial market. From Nicholas Taleb's point of view, it's very, very difficult. Okay, financial markets, predicting the value of money, the share value, all these are quite difficult. Okay, but for applications like loan advisor, mortgage screening, okay, currency price predictions, all these domains, machine learning is being employed nowadays, but with some human intervention. Okay, semi-supervised they call it. Some human beings will also be involved in taking a collective decisions. Okay, machine will be acting more like an aid to the human being. Another area. Okay, then manufacturing domain. So manufacturing, we are now moving towards something like Industry 4.0. Okay, most of you are aware of this. Okay, manufacturing Industry 4.0, robotics, IoT, big data, ML. These are all the buzzwords. Okay, these four coupled together, they perform a lot of operations for manufacturing, performance improvement, and quality products producing. Okay, producing quality products. So machine learning application, look at this, welding quality analysis, chip quality analysis. See, the kind of applications are huge, numbers are big. Okay, modeling of chemical process systems. Then medical domain, this is another area. In fact, many things are happening in this domain. Okay, breast cancer cell analysis, EEG and ECG analysis, optimization of transplant times, hospital expense reduction, hospital quality improvement, emergency room test advertisement. Now, under COVID times, you can see the machine learning community how fully engaged in trying to solve this problem, COVID-19. Okay, so you can see a lot of papers coming out, published papers as well as products related to AI applications and machine learning applications for COVID treatments. Okay, something is happening this time. So robotics, another area, speech recognition, securities, telecommunications, transportations, you name it, you get it. Okay, you can go through it afterwards in a leisurely manner, but just I'm projecting to you to motivate you that the kind of applications are humongous, nominal number of applications. Okay, a typical input variable is identified for each other. For example, you take dynamic systems, human body, neuroelectric pulses, company means information, power plant fuel rate, automobile steering wheel movement, robot voltage to joint motor conversions. Joint motor can be the input. What will be the output? Joint motions, effector motion. Automobile front wheel turn, that's output. So muscle with neuroelectric pulses as input to a machine learning system, the output will be the body movements. So you can model it. So modeling is a very powerful tool. So with machine learning, you can model many systems. One interesting application is a robot application. In fact, most of you will be studying robotic application this semester. So in fact, in robots, you'll be learning something called forward kinematics. So wherein you'll be having a robot, okay, with a joint like this, and you'll be having a kind of something called end effector. Using this end effector, you will do all these operations. For example, you can weld and you can spray paint. Okay, you can pick and place object, pick up object. So what is happening here is, okay, this is a base. Okay, now these are all joints. Joint 1, joint 2, joint 3. Okay, you have different joints. Now what happens at every joint, you'll be having something called motors. Now this end effector, you want to locate a particular object. Okay, For reaching a particular point in the space or in a particular object, you need to give appropriate electric signals to the motor. Then only you will get the corresponding theta. Okay, the theta angles are important. For a particular angle of theta, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, your end effector may reach a particular position. Okay, so if I know these angles, I can tell directly where exactly the position of the end effector is. So this kind of a problem we call it as forward kinematics problem. But for control purpose, what do? You train a network, neural network, for the given angles, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, and you identify the position. You give the position as a label. Okay, the input output data are given. Lot of data, as usual. More the data, better the learning. Lot of data you have to provide. These samples you provide, and the network will be completely ready. For any angle if you provide, it will immediately tell what is the position of the end effector. That's what here it is, joint motion, end effector motion. Now, once I know this, if I take the inverse model of this neural network, inverse model, what will be the input? The end effector position is the input. So this I can measure with the help of a sensor, and then I can immediately tell what will be the corresponding angles I require. Then knowing these angles, I can control my motor. So this is called an inverse control in robotics domain. Okay, it's a very interesting area. Maybe you can type in Google, you can see inverse motor control. Inverse control. Inverse control of robots. Industrial robots particularly. You will be learning about it in robotics and automation subject. Okay, so that's another area. So now, as I have told you earlier, we are talking about something called hard conventional computing, and where we are going gradually towards soft computing, software computing, and a much bigger idea is the softest computing, which in fact you can relate it with human beings, with consciousness, a huge level of adaptability. Okay, that's what. If you go up in the ladder more and more towards the softest computing, what happens? More the intelligence for the machine will be completely free, autonomous, dimensionality will be more, complexity handling will be more. Okay, purity means without any external bias or something. Very clear thinking, capability to deal with fuzziness, computation capability. So gradually, if you go up towards softest computing, there is potentially a lot of research opportunities here. You can see that very clearly. We are here, software computing. So still we have to go towards software computing and software system. This is a human desire to create a machine which can think like us. Okay, machine think like us. Okay, that's the idea. So soft computing. If you look at soft computing, you can clearly see machine learning is one. ARM, neural computing, I think these two are connected. There is something called evolutionary computing and rule-based fuzzy logics, probabilistic reasoning, another area, particularly Bayesian estimators. Is another area people are really working on nowadays. And consciousness, wisdom-based expert systems. Okay, expert systems. We are trying to transfer human expertise in terms of rules. But the number of rules are going to be huge numbers. But with modern day computing power and generation of data, I think we can do something in this domain also, expert systems domain also. Okay, so that's also happened. So you can clearly see soft computing under this 6 different categories. So if you look at any modern day industry also, you can see intelligent machines are playing an important role, and intelligent machines will have a structure more like this. There will be a machine or process component, there will be sensors. You can see immediately the basic feedback control system mechanisms. Sensors, sensory perceptions, then machine intelligence. So based on that machine intelligence, some decisions will be taken, and that will be given to controllers or actuators to act on the real environment, real physical environment. Okay, so thereby bringing about a change around us. So this is intelligent machines, picture machines. So now let us gradually go deeper into the subject. So the first unit, unit 1, we'll be talking about neural networks. The basic motivation for neural networks stems from biological neuron. Okay, in our brain we have, in the cortex region alone, we have billions and billions of neurons. They are the computing nodes. So if you look at the processing power of a neuron with a computer, which one will be faster? Can you imagine? Can somebody come up with a creative answer? The modern day processing frequency of computers comparing to human brain based neuronal computing power, which one will be faster? Any answer?
Neuron.
Neuron will be faster, you are saying? A single neuron, the processing power. A single neuron processing power, okay, the speed, processing speed will be much lesser than the modern day computing speed. But this particular limitation can be overcome. Okay, you can overcome this by having more number of neurons. Okay. Parallel computing, they call it. How many number of neurons we have? We have billions. They all operate in tandem. That's the power of the modern our human brain. Okay, they all work in a parallel computing. So that's where the parallel processing comes into play. Instead of working with one processor, let us have hundreds and thousands of processors all working in parallel. Okay, so this is an area really computing domain people they are working on. Okay, parallel processing. This idea stems from human brain. After 1940s, people are really started appreciating the power of parallel processing. Instead of serial processing, they are going to work on parallel processing. Instead of having only one processor with a very powerful computing capacity and receiving data in a serial mode, we don't work with very minimal processing power, have billions of processors. That idea is more like human brain. Okay, so if you look at the human brain neuron, the neuronal structure will be looking like this. So here you can see there is something called the soma, they call it. It's a processing area. And something called axon hillock goes on like this. And there is something called myelin sheath. Okay, so you can see here. And you can see it receives input to some kind of tentacle-like arrangement. They call it as dendrites. So each neuron looks like this. We have billions like this in our cortex, brain. Each neuron receives external stimuli. To what? To dendrites. And in the soma, something happens. What happens is normally this neuron will be at a resting potential, okay, of some minus 70 millivolt. How do we get this potential? Always there will be some chemical components present inside the neuron, and these are all some kind of membrane. Okay, permeable membrane arrangement. So there will be frequent exchange of ions happen. Okay, ions going inside, ions coming inside, plus ion, negative ion. Okay, so naturally there will be a potential difference in the neuron, and that will be at minus 70 millivolt. They call it as a threshold value. Now, when the neuron receives external stimuli through these dendrites, what happens? This resting potential will get altered. You understand what I'm saying? There will be initially, when it is rest, it will be at some minus 70 millivolt. And when it receives input, this will be altered, this will be disturbed. So when it crosses this threshold value of minus 70 millivolt, this neuron will fire, or otherwise will give some neurotransmitters output. And through this synapse, okay, this is called synapse, the information, the neurotransmitters will be shared with other neurons which are connected to this. Okay, you have billions of neurons now. So naturally, these neurons will transmit that information to the neurons, and there will be the dendrites of the other neurons will be very near to the synapse, and therefore these dendrites, other neuron will receive this neurotransmitter input. So it's again a stimuli for that neuron. Likewise, this is what they have studied. Okay, the dendrites, they receive information through axon hillock. Neuron transmitters will be transmitted through the synapse to the other neurons. Okay, here there is a receptor here, dendrite receptor. This is a synapse. So you see neurotransmitting chemicals are being shared. Okay, microtubule neurotransmitters are all there. So if you take a look at this carefully, you can understand many things. Okay, now this is what the general structure is. Okay, you can see clearly this is the soma or the cell body, and the center part you call it the nucleus, and these are all the dendrites, and the end portion you call it as the synapse. This is another neuron, the neuron 2, neuron 1. Neuron 1, when it fires through the synapse, the information reaches what? The second dendrite. Okay, second neuron dendrite, and thereby this will fire. Okay, so but when it will happen, when the threshold value of minus 70 millivolt is exceeded, neuron will fire. So this is what they have studied during 1940s. Okay, and they come up with these following facts. Axon terminal releases chemical called neurotransmitters. These act on the membrane of the receptor dendrite to change its polarization. 70 millivolt is the range. Decrease in potential difference, you call it as excitatory synapse. Increase in potential difference, you call it as inhibitory synapse. The axon will be depolarized, we leave that. The resulting action potential travels through the axon. When the action potential reaches the terminal buttons, it triggers the release of neurotransmitter to the nearby neurons. Nearby neurons will receive it.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, one doubt, sir. Sir, axon
Yeah.
is the other end of the neuron, sir, away from the cell and the soma.
No. Axon is something, it is a neurotransmitter carrying tentacle-like arrangement. This is axon.
Okay,
Can you
okay,
see?
sir. Okay, sir.
And at the end of the axon is what you are seeing, the synapse. Synapse is the one which is connected with the nearby neurons, with the dendrites of the nearby neurons. You understand?
Okay.
So when dendrites is here, the synapse will come over here. This synapse are from the other neuron. Okay, they will be touching this dendrite, very near to the dendrites. They will pass on neurotransmitters to this this neuron, and that is called as the stimuli. Okay, you call it as a stimuli, the stimulating.
Okay, sir.
Understand? Okay. So that's what this diagram in fact is. Can you
Okay.
see it now clearly?
Yes, sir.
This is axon, neurotransmitter carrying medium. This is the nucleus. Okay, and here it goes and reaches the synapse, and the synapse is very near to neuron 2's dendrites. Can you see it?
Yes,
Now
sir.
it passes that information, neurotransmitter, chemical transmitter. That goes to this neuron, and that threshold value may change. Unless the value is greater than threshold, it will not fire. You understand? It will not release anything. It will be
Yes.
sleeping. It will be sleeping. Okay, people studied this kind of thing, and they come up with a model called a neuronal model. Okay, so that model is more like this. So we will discuss about it maybe next class. Okay. Any doubts so far? Whatever we discussed. This robotics domain is another area you can concentrate. Robotic automation. Those who are going to study that subject, think of neural networks applications. Anything? Any doubts? Any queries? All right. Can I stop here? Okay. Any doubts? Sai Pavani? Gurubaran?
No, sir.
Okay, Nandini? Raghunathan? Raghunatha, இருக்கியா? இருக்கியா கிளம்பிட்டியா? ஜெகன் லெஃப்ட். வர்ஷா, யஷ்வந்த் பால் ஓடியா விடான். ஜெகன் கேட்டு வேணும்ட்டு ஏதாவது. Okay, fine. If there are no doubts, I will stop this recording. And